We like to be precise with our content and not cash in on the ongoing conflicts. So instead of spamming your timelines with hot takes constantly, we decided to take our time and summarize the continuing Russian invasion of Ukraine with monthly videos. This conflict will enter history as pivotal, both historically and in terms of military science, so we'll have more to say over the next while. For now, allow us to present you our video on the first phase of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And with a look at the war's beginning, we can also recommend a celebration of a war coming to an end, brought to you by our sponsor Magellan TV. This documentary streaming service, founded by filmmakers, presents Tony Robinson's VE Day, Minute by Minute, an in-depth look at a single day, the day the war in the European theatre of World War II came to a close. It brings historians and veterans together to tell the story of a momentous 24-hour period that changed the modern world. There's much more to see on Magellan TV too. They have the richest and most varied history content available anywhere, covering everything from the ancient to modern eras, wars, biographies, and the Earth itself. Plus, as well as history content, they also give you extensive collections of science, true crime, travel, and other documentaries. They add 15 or more hours of 4K high-definition content every week for their subscribers at no extra cost. It's all viewable anytime, anywhere, on televisions, laptops, mobile devices, and more. Get access to 3,500 hours of ad-free documentaries for only $4.99 a month, and get a month for free by subscribing to Magellan TV via our link in the description. In October 2021, the Russian army started a build-up on the Russia-Ukraine and Belarus-Ukraine borders. The Kremlin explained it with planned military exercises, brushing aside all concerns and declaring that they had a right to move their forces wherever they deemed necessary within their borders. But soon the United States started asserting that the massing of Russian troops on the Ukrainian border was a build-up for an impending invasion of Ukraine. The Russian government vehemently denied this, while some NATO states and Ukraine considered the US reports exaggerated. Nevertheless, by December, Russia started making demands for NATO to guarantee that Ukraine would never join the organization, that the alliance would withdraw its forces from countries that joined the alliance after 1997, that NATO would stop its expansion, that NATO would seek agreement with Russia for any activities in Ukraine, Eastern Europe, the Caucasus and Central Asia. Naturally, the United States and its allies rejected these proposals. Despite the Russian assurances and attempts of Western leaders like French President Emmanuel Macron to find common ground, the tensions continued growing. On the 17th of February, forces of the unrecognized Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics and Ukraine accused each other of shelling. Unrecognized governments of Donetsk and Luhansk ordered the evacuation of their populations. On the 21st of February 2022, the Russian President Vladimir Putin made a threatening speech, questioning Ukrainian statehood and calling it a Bolshevik-created entity. On the same day, Russia became the first country to recognize the so-called Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, justifying this step by claiming that a genocide had been committed by the Ukrainian government and neo-Nazi groups against Russian-speaking people in Donbass. In the early morning of the 24th of February, Putin announced the start of the special military operation to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. A military conflict in Ukraine, which started in 2014, turned into a full-scale war with Russia's invasion. According to different estimates, Russia deployed 150,000 to 200,000 troops out of total active personnel of approximately 900,000, along with up to 40,000 separatists from Donetsk and Luhansk, later joined by a few thousand troops from Syria and separatist republics of Abkhazia and Ossetia. It is safe to assume that most of the best Russian troops were deployed to Ukraine. At the same time, the rest of the active personnel were mostly conscripts stationed throughout vast Russia. The Russian army divides into battalion tactical groups, BTG, which are autonomous military units consisting of infantry, armored and unarmored military vehicles, artillery, field hospitals, and so on. According to the latest pre-invasion figures provided by the official US sources, Russia amassed approximately 120 BTGs on the border with Ukraine. BTGs usually have 600 to 1,000 infantrymen and are supposed to have 10 tanks and between 40 and 70 other armored vehicles. This allows us to estimate that 1,200 tanks and 4,800 to 8,400 other armored vehicles are being used in the Russian Expeditionary Force if all BTGs are equipped by the book, which is rarely the case, especially in an army known for vast corruption and poor administration. According to the ISS military balance, Russia possesses 1,391 military aircraft and 544 attack helicopters, but it is impossible to know how many of them Russia is exactly using in the war in Ukraine. The same source shows that Ukraine has active personnel of approximately 200,000 troops, more than 3,000 armored vehicles, 132 military aircraft, and 55 helicopters. Since Ukraine has declared general mobilization and armed volunteer territorial defense, we could assume the actual number of people resisting the invasion is way higher. Moreover, thousands of volunteers joined Ukraine's international brigade. While talking about the comparison of forces, it is necessary to note that the Ukrainian army has come a long way since 2014. The army has been significantly modernized. Its military arsenal is much better, as the United States, United Kingdom, Turkey and others have provided Ukraine with anti-tank weapons like NLAW and Javelin, anti-aircraft missile systems such as Stinger, along with TB2 Bayraktar drones. The Russian offensive started with a massive shelling and airstrike campaign throughout Ukraine, with more than 100 missile strikes to destroy the Ukrainian military infrastructure, bases, anti-aircraft missile systems and arms depots. The later events demonstrated that Russia failed to achieve its goal, as the Ukrainian military infrastructure, albeit heavily damaged, managed to mostly stay intact. This was followed by a ground offensive in 4 general directions. The northern offensive by the Russian troops deployed in Belarus towards the capital, Kyiv, the eastern offensive from Belgorod towards Kharkiv, the Donbass southeastern offensive from the territories controlled by pro-Russian separatists and Voronezh towards the Ukrainian-controlled territories of the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, and the southern offensive from Crimea towards Kherson, Mykolaiv and ultimately Odessa. It looks like the Russian strategy was to rapidly advance towards major urban centers, taking large cities like Kyiv, Kharkiv and Odessa as soon as possible to break the morale and resolve of the Ukrainians and force the government to capitulate, along with ensuring the land connection between the separatist-ruled part of Donbass and Crimea, and securing the whole Black Sea shore of Ukraine. These 4 offensive axes were supposed to merge after securing advances along the front line to make pincer and envelopment movements more possible. The exact political endgame of the Russian offensive still puzzles analysts, with claims ranging from installing a pro-Russian puppet government to dividing eastern Ukraine into several pro-Russian states. The Ukrainian defense strategy was an orderly withdrawal to urban centers while fighting advancing Russian forces, bogging them down in urban warfare, ambushing and attacking their supply lines. It would be illogical for the Ukrainian army to defend all the terrain along the whole of the massive front, given the Russian advantage in firepower. The analyst Michael Kaufman calls this tactic trading space for time. On the first day of the invasion, Russia made the most significant advance on the southern front, where the 58th Combined Arms Army, CAA, advanced for about 60 kilometers, pushing the Ukrainian 57th Motorized Brigade back and taking the North Crimean Canal and reaching the outskirts of Kherson. On the northern front, the 35th CAA took Chernobyl and the Chernobyl power plant, while the 36th CAA pushed towards the capital Kyiv, bypassing Chernihiv. The Ukrainian 1st Tank Brigade managed to halt the Russian advance, as it failed to capture the city of Chernihiv. The 41st CAA's advance towards Kyiv from Sumy was also halted in the outskirts of Sumy by the 56th Motorized Brigade. The Russian airborne attack on the Hostomel airport near Kyiv by the elite 31st Guards Air Assault Brigade of the Russian VDV, Elite Airborne Army, also failed after a Ukrainian counterattack. The rapid capture of Kharkiv did not happen either, as the 1st Guards Tank Army could not break the resistance of the Ukrainian 92nd Mechanized Brigade. The advance of the Luhansk militia and the Russian 20th CAA towards Severodonetsk met the resistance of the Ukrainian 53rd Brigade, with heavy fighting around the town of Shtestia. Elements of the 8th CAA and the Donetsk militia pushed the 54th Mechanized Brigade towards the northwest from the Ukrainian DNR line of contact, and the 56th Motorized Brigade towards the east along the Black Sea shore, with heavy fighting around Mariupol, but failed to reach its overall goals of taking over the rest of Donetsk Oblast and breaking the Ukrainian resistance. On the 25th of February, heavy fighting on all fronts continued. The Russian troops forced their way into Oblon, a mere 9 kilometers away from the Ukrainian Parliament building. The 95th Air Assault Brigade and the 72nd Mechanized Brigade were there to protect Kyiv. At this point, the United States even offered Ukrainian President Zelensky a chance to leave the capital, to which he reportedly replied, "The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a ride." The threat to the capital was real, as during his speech to the nation, he called for the Ukrainians to brace for an offensive and urged them to prepare for a hard battle for Kyiv. Zelensky's refusal to leave and insistence to fight against the odds turned him into a hero and the symbol of the Ukrainian resistance, further mobilizing Ukrainian society and galvanizing the international community to adopt crippling sanctions on Russia, such as disconnecting several major Russian banks from SWIFT. But the situation continued to be difficult for the Ukrainians. American intelligence predicted that the fall of Kyiv would happen within 96 hours. Even though the Russians failed to capture Sumy, they continued their march towards Kyiv from there, advancing to Romny. On the southern front, the Russians developed their success by capturing Novokhovka and moving closer to securing Kherson and Melitopol. Taking Melitopol was essential to continue the march along the Black Sea shore, to merge with Russian and separatist units trying to take Mariupol, along with advancing towards Zaporizhia, which could have encircled the Ukrainian units fighting on the Donbass front. In Kharkiv and Donbass, the situation remained more or less stable, and there were even reports of Ukrainian counter-offensives pushing back the Russian units to the border in Milove. February 25th was also the day when the defenders of Zminy Island, south of Odessa, famously responded to a Russian demand of surrender. F*** off, Russian military ship. On February 26th, the Russian army mostly used special forces and airborne troops to fight the Ukrainian defense in Kyiv. With the 36th CAA giving up on the rapid capture of Chernihiv and bypassing it to move towards the capital, it looked like other Russian units around Kyiv were waiting for its arrival to strike Kyiv with massive force. Similarly unable to take the city of Kharkiv with a direct assault, the 1st Guards Tank Army divided into 2 groups to bypass the city to possibly envelop the Ukrainian units in the city or move towards Kyiv. The situation in the southeastern Donbass front remained relatively stable as well. The Russian troops and separatist militia captured the port of Berdyansk and the Berdyansk airport. DPR separatists also claimed to capture Pavlopol and Pistovik, while LNR separatists also claimed to seize Lopeskina and Makivka. Russia continued its advance on the southern front. The 42nd Guards Motor Rifle Division of the 58th CAA of the Russian Army continued fighting in Kherson, while also sending units towards the city of Mykolaiv. Other elements of the 58th CAA were engaged in fighting to seize Melitopol, along with advancing towards Enerhodar and the Zaporizhian power plant in the north. Alexei Arestovich, the advisor to the Ukrainian president, admitted on February 27th that Ukraine lost control of the whole of Berdyansk. Prevailing in Kherson and Melitopol, capturing Henichesk and Kherson airport, meant that the Russian offensive on the southern front developed its success, increasing the threat on Mykolaiv and Odessa in the west and Mariupol in the east. The first reports of the Russian army merging its offensives in the southern and southeastern front around Mariupol also emerged on that day. But the continuing assault on Zaporizhia, namely on Enerhodar, Vasilivka and Tokmak, meant that the 58th CAA, the most successful unit of the Russian war effort so far, had to fight in 3 different directions, dividing its resources. On other fronts, the situation remained more or less stable, as Russia made small gains, such as the capture of Kupiansk and the encirclement of Konotop. But the 41st CAA's attack on Preluki and the 1st Guards Tank Army's attacks on Kharkiv and Okhtyrka were repelled. By now, it had become clear that the strategy of causing collapse of the Ukrainian defense by rapid mass offensive on major Ukrainian cities had failed, as the Ukrainian army not only remained functional in the cities, but also managed to harass Russian supply lines and inflict major losses on the Russian manpower and military vehicles. In response to the Western sanctions and failure to rapidly defeat the Ukrainian resistance, Putin ordered Russia's nuclear forces on high alert. The valiant defense of Ukraine caught the West by surprise, as contrary to almost unanimous expectation of the fall of Ukraine, the Ukrainian army remained a force capable of defending the country. As a result, for the first time in history, the EU announced direct military aid to a foreign country, Ukraine, while Germany made a major turn in its foreign policy by sending weapons to Ukraine and stating its intention to dramatically increase its military spending. But Russia still possessed major resources sufficient to defeat Ukraine. On February 28th, satellite images of a 64-kilometer-long massive column of tanks, military vehicles and artillery moving from Belarus towards the western part of Kyiv were shared on social media. Along with that, on the Kyiv front, elements of the 41st and 36th CAAs moved to bypass Sumy and Chernihiv to merge with an aim to make a push towards East Kyiv. Presumably, the overall goal was to attack Kyiv from a number of directions, but the maintenance of a formidable force by Ukraine in Chernihiv and Sumy oblasts caused a major threat to the extended supply lines of the Russian army. Elements of the Ukrainian 1st Tank Army conducted defensive actions against the 41st and 36th CAAs, stalling the Russian advance in Nizhin. Along with maintaining a solid defense around Kyiv, the Ukrainian forces also engaged in pointed counterattacks, such as in Makariv and Borodyanka. In Donbass, heavy battles around Volnovakha, Starobilsk and Mariupol continued. In Kharkiv, Ukraine set a defensive line between Chuhuiv and Balaklia, preventing the Russians from encircling Kharkiv and moving towards Poltava and Dnipro. Numerous reports of heavy shelling of civilian areas in Kyiv, Kharkiv, Mariupol and other cities of Ukraine continued. Also, the first death of a Russian general in the war was reported, as the deputy commander of the 41st CAA, Major General Andrei Sukhovetsky, was allegedly killed. On a diplomatic front, as expected, the first round of Russian-Ukrainian negotiations in Belarus did not bring any positive results. The first day of March brought several setbacks to the Ukrainian defense. Reports of capture of Kherson and Melitopol meant that now the 42nd Motor Rifle Division was free to move towards Mykolaiv, while other units of the 58th CAA engaged in Melitopol could join the attack on Mariupol from the west, making the encirclement of the city a real threat. Reports of the Belarusian army joining the Russian offensive were not confirmed. On March 2nd, Western intelligence sources reported that Russia was switching its military tactic from head-on offensive on cities to attritional war, wearing down the Ukrainian army by continued assault on its defensive lines and shelling of Ukrainian cities to break the morale of the population, as the overall pace of their offensive remained well below expectations. Ukrainians report the reclaiming of Hlivka by the forces of the 96th Air Assault Brigade and Makariv by the defenders of the Kyiv perimeter. During the next few days, both sides claimed to take Irpin, Bucha and Hostomel, towns in the vicinity of Kyiv, the capture of which was crucial for the success of the Russian campaign in Kyiv. It indicates that heavy fighting was going on around this area, but these reports also stipulated that the Russian attacks were mostly carried out by 1 or 2 BTGs at the same time, which was interpreted by military experts as an inability for the Russian army to carry out coordinated attacks by a large number of units. Another point of the Russian offensive in the Kyiv front was Brovary, But the attempts to push back the Ukrainian army there by the 41st and 36th CAAs were repelled. Within the next several days, these unsuccessful attacks would continue. On other fronts, Russia took Balaklia, repelled the Ukrainian counterattack on Holivka, and engaged in heavy battle to take the Mykolaiv airport on March 3rd. But possibly the biggest gain of the Russian army on this day was the capture of Svatovo, which is situated between Kharkiv and Luhansk by the 6th CAA and by the Luhansk militia. This allowed the Russian eastern and southeastern axes to link. The only positive result of the second round of negotiations was the agreement to open corridors for civilians stuck in encircled cities like Sumy, Chernihiv and Mariupol. On the 4th to 6th of March, Russia made important gains on several fronts. In the south, the 58th CAA took Enerhodar and the power plant in the vicinity, along with Tokmak and Vasilivka. There were also reports of successful Russian advances on the Mykolaiv airport and heavy fighting in the Mykolaiv Oblast, which was defended by the 57th Motorized Brigade. Along with that, the 6th CAA and Luhansk separatist forces started attacking Izium and Severodonetsk. The fall of these cities could have been disastrous for Ukraine, as it could have possibly allowed the Russian units to encircle the 56th Motorized Brigade and other Ukrainian units fighting in Donbass. Heavy fighting was reported along the Chuhuiv-Balaklia line, which the Ukrainian defense managed to withstand. They were not as successful at the Nezhin-Priluki line, as the Russians were able to penetrate it, pushing within 20 kilometers of central Kyiv from the northeast. The Russians also managed to encircle Oktyrka. On March 7th, Ukraine managed to reclaim the Mykolaiv airport and Chuhuiv. The massive tank column in the west of Kyiv still threatened the city, but no significant fighting or movement in that direction was reported. This was also the day when the first international volunteers joined the defense of Kyiv. In the south, Russia repeated its tactic of bypassing the cities, which it failed to take with a head-on assault, as the 7th Guards Mountain Air Assault Division bypassed Mykolaiv towards Voznesensk. The aim was to force the southern Burg River and advance on strategically crucial Odessa. On March 8th, Russia took steps to solidify its encirclement of Mariupol by capturing the highway between the city and Volnovakha, while also moving elements of the 41st CAA to the Sumy Oblast to strengthen its extended and constantly attacked supply lines. On the 9th to the 12th, the Ukrainian 1st Tank Division managed to repel the Russian offensive by the 90th Tank Division and the 55th Motorized Rifle Brigade on Chernihiv, along with establishing a connection with the pocket of resistance in Nizhin. Heavy battles continued in Izium and Severodonetsk. Russian offensives on Brovary by the 6th Guards Tank Regiment, on Godyach by the 4th Guards Tank Division, and on Krovoy by the 7th Guards Mountain Air Assault Division were also successfully repelled. But the Ukrainian situation around Mariupol continued to deteriorate, as the Russian forces and Donetsk separatists moved into portions of the eastern part of the city, along with taking Volnovakha. The infamous tank column northwest of Kyiv by now had dispersed and redeployed elsewhere. The most important event of the 13th to 16th of March was the ballistic strike at the Yavoriv training center near Lviv, as the Russian Defense Ministry claimed that 180 mercenaries were killed in this strike on the base, where training of foreign volunteers was conducted. By these dates, it had become quite clear that Russia had stalled in all directions and was unable to conduct any major offensive operations anywhere but Donbass. While the Russians made some gains in Izium and pushed around Rubizhne, the Ukrainian offensive towards Kherson pushed the 20th Guards Motor Rifle Division and reached the town of Posad-Pokrovska. The Ukrainians also broke the encirclement of Oktyrka. On the 19th to 20th of March, reports of Russian troops digging trenches and deploying minefields around Kyiv indicate that the Russians had given up on offensive operations to take the capital and prepared for a defensive war. On March 21st to 24th, Ukraine gained ground around Kyiv by counterattacking towards Bucha, Vozol, Moshchun, Makariv and Irpin, while Russia made progress in Izium and Mariupol. On the 25th to 29th of March, Ukraine capitalized on the low morale and poor supply of the Russian army and made considerable progress on several fronts. The Ukrainian army solidified its successes on the Kiev front by pushing back the 37th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade and the 31st Guards Air Assault Brigade from Irpin, and the 90th Tank Division further away from Brovary, and reclaimed Lukyanivka. In the Sumy-Kharkiv axis, the 93rd Brigade took back Trostianets, Boromlia and Malarohan, and ended the encirclement of the city of Sumy, forcing the 27th Guards Motor Rifle Brigade to withdraw to Russia for presumed redeployment in Donbass, where Russia still had a capability to launch a successful offensive operation and made some gains around Izium and Severodonetsk, along with capturing more of Mariupol, putting the Ukrainian defense of the city in an even more desperate situation. On the southern front, the Russian offensive had completely stalled as well. On the 30th of March, reports of withdrawal of several Russian units from the Kiev axis started to emerge, whether due to heavy losses or as part of a campaign to de-escalate military operations around Kiev. Along with that, redeployment of Russian units, such as the elements of the 30th CAA and the 1st Guards Tank Army to Belgorod for replenishment, to presumably later send them to the Donbass front, continued. During the next couple of days, we witnessed several instances of fighting on the northern front with Ukrainian success, and then a complete withdrawal of Russian units from Kiev and Chernihiv oblasts. The 35th, 36th and 41st CAAs made an orderly withdrawal towards Belarus, while reports of the redeployment of the 90th Tank Division and 2nd Guards Motor Rifle Division to the Donbass front emerged. On April 2nd, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry stated that Ukraine was now controlling all of the Kiev Oblast. On April 4th, the governor of Zhytomyr Oblast also stated that the region was now completely under Ukrainian control. By April 5th, there were no Russian troops left in the Chernihiv Oblast either. Ukraine prevailed on the northern front and the Battle of Kiev against all odds. But Russian loss came at a very high price for the Ukrainian military, infrastructure, and particularly the civilian population. As the Ukrainian army reclaimed Bucha, it witnessed horrific scenes of hundreds of civilians lying dead on its streets. Satellite images taken on the days when the Russian army still controlled this town prove beyond reasonable doubt that this massacre was indeed committed by Russia. Ukraine also staged counterattacks in Zaporizhia and Kherson oblasts. On the 31st of March, they liberated Melanivka, Vesela, Zelenyi and other towns in the Zaporizhia Oblast, along with several towns and settlements in the Kherson Oblast, including Novovoronstovka on the 1st to 2nd of April. But around the same dates, Russia continued very slow but steady progress in Donbass, as they claimed to capture Zolota Niva in the Donetsk Oblast and Zhytomyr in the Luhansk Oblast. On the 1st of April, Ukraine admitted that Russia was able to capture Izium after days of heavy fighting. But arguably, the most important event of this day was the Ukrainian strike on a fuel storage depot in the Russian city of Belgorod, which was the first incident of spillover of the war in Ukraine to Russian territory. On April 4th, reports of the advance of the Russian forces from the Kharkiv axis towards Slavyansk started emerging. According to various military experts, the capture of Slavyansk created options to link up with the Russian units fighting in Rubizhne or advancing towards Holivka, both of which carried a potential risk of encirclement for the Ukrainian units on the Donbass front. By the 5th of April, elements of the 1st Guards Tank Army, including elements of the 2nd GMRD, 4th GTD, 47th GTD, the 106th GAD, the 144th MRD, and the 3rd MRD, were redeployed to Izium, and we can expect most of the Russian offensive operations to be conducted along the Donets River, which the Ukrainian 25th Airborne Brigade and the 81st Air Assault Brigade will try to defend. The presidential aide, Arestovich, noted in his interview that the Ukrainian army faces 8-to-1 numerical disadvantage on this axis. On the 6th of April, it was confirmed that the Russian army completed its withdrawal from the Sumy Oblast too. These forces were to be redeployed in Donbass too. Lastly, the situation of the Ukrainian units in Mariupol was getting increasingly more desperate, According to British intelligence, by April 7th, Russia already controlled 76% of the city. But it is also reported that the Russian units participating in the siege of Mariupol are suffering heavy losses amid fierce resistance by the Azov Battalion and units of the regular Ukrainian army. In the run-up to and on the first few days of the war, almost everyone expected a quick Russian victory and the collapse of the Ukrainian army. It was only a question of when. But the Ukrainian army has defied the odds by standing tall and, more recently, prevailing in the Battle of Kyiv and reclaiming some of the lost territories in other regions. Despite the overwhelming advantage in firepower, bad planning by the Russian command manifested in an inability to conduct major offensive operations in the coordination of a large number of units and different branches of the military. Poor logistical preparation was demonstrated by images of incapacitated military vehicles due to lack of fuel, and insufficient food supplies proved by the Russian looting of civilian stores. Low morale, the clear indicator of which is scores of Russian servicemen, particularly conscripts, surrendering to Ukrainians, since they don't really understand what they're fighting for and are just completely unprepared for the brutality of war. Inability to ensure air domination, despite the huge numerical advantage in military aircraft, has made the Russian war effort in Ukraine go horribly wrong. Around Kharkiv and the south of Ukraine, the Russians have been pushed back as well. The only axis where Russians and pro-Russian separatists can hope to gain any considerable success is the southeastern front. The Russian General Staff has stated in late March that its main focus is on the so-called liberation of Ukrainian-controlled territories of Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts, since it remains the only front where the Russians can realistically hope for success. Russia continues to employ the tactic of shelling cities, including civilian areas, causing the death of 1,611 civilians, according to the UN. Mariupol, Kharkiv, Sumy and other cities have been heavily damaged. Millions of Ukrainians have fled their country. Both sides have suffered heavy losses, but the Ukrainians have inflicted way more damage on the Russians than was expected. By April 7th, Oryx military analysis blog visually confirmed Russian losses at 448 destroyed or abandoned tanks, 750 armored vehicles, 20 fighter jets, 32 helicopters and 3 Navy ships, against Ukrainian losses of 95 tanks, under 200 armored vehicles, 18 aircraft and helicopters and 15 ships. According to the NATO estimates of the 29th of March, 7,000 to 15,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in Ukraine. The US sources reported on the 9th of March that 2,000 to 4,000 Ukrainian soldiers were killed during the invasion. Soon we will summarize the second month of this conflict, which proved to be not the short, victorious war Vladimir Putin hoped for, but a war of attrition that could change the fate of the entire region. So make sure you are subscribed and have pressed